Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So not only have I posted the agenda in our Zoom chat, I found out there's a handy little feature in Slack. So if you're in our Slack channel, the agenda is pinned to the top of the channel. Anyone has any opens, go ahead and drop those into the open section. We're going to do a sub-project update. We're going to take a vote. Be very exciting day. Well, we'll be tabulating a vote and having a debate, possibly. Give it one more minute. All right, folks, welcome to the October 18th edition of the OSS-SIRT SIG. Do we have any new friends that wanted to say hello today? Can I ask for a volunteer to help us scribe, please? Please.
I can do it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's very helpful because we have a lot of folks that can't make this call, so they do actually read the notes. So it's very useful to the broader. Really appreciate it. All righty, if you have any opens, go ahead and put them into the open section. We'll talk about those after we review our sub-team activities. We'll start off with section 1, which is a very fine beginning. Randall, are you able to give me a quick summary of what section 1 has been up to?
Yeah, so we basically finished our plan. I will put the pull request in there, at least our initial scope of the plan. I did go back in there and notice a couple of little thingamajiggies. And yeah, but like typos. But one thing I wanted to ask you, Krob, let me open up my log seek because I have a version in my log seek. We didn't talk about Solar Designer.
Right.
Yes. So I don't know if there was anything to add because there was a one little glitch with that. So other than that, everything is good.
At this time, we're not in a state to be able to talk about the lists, but that might be a future option for us to explore.
Okay, so just for the record, I will make an update today. I'm going to move that one back to TVA or TBD because right now we had survey results that affirm or disputes the top level offices and clarifies the details of these problems. But other than that, everything is good. Everything is basically final on my side.
And from essentially your section's focused on working and getting data from upstream. He is a good person we could talk to outside of anything with the lists. So if we wanted to get his opinion on open source CVD, that would be a great resource.
Absolutely.
All right. Any
I just
questions?
wanted to point out, because I think we had a talk about the list before, and I think we wanted to make a different meeting on all of that type of stuff. So yeah.
Not prepared to do that yet.
Okay.
Art.
Hi, sorry, quick second. Solar is a great resource just for case by case random things. Awesome. And in section 2, there's a bit of how would the CERT, produce its results or publish things. Mailing list generically is in there. So whether or not that turns out to be those mailing lists, we'll see. But we have that as one of our outputs. Thanks, over.
Yeah, and it's something we could talk about. Yeah, we might not have a output channel. We might have several. And it's kind of up to the team to craft that, how we feel the best way to start jabbering about things after they're public. Do you want to provide an update on section 2 while you're here,
Art? Sure. Section 2 met yesterday. We have finally gotten from Google Docs over to ye old Markdown and GitHub. So we had a first draft of that transition. Good discussion yesterday. There are some edits and changes to be made to that doc. And there is also, I need to do one more pass of Google Doc land for anything important that is gotten missed and did not get brought over to Markdown land effectively. But the URL's there. It's in the place all the rest of the things are. Folks can go read it. I think that's mostly it. I'd say the points, the least well understood points involve, right? The staffing and resource estimates are trickier, assuming we're planning on handling actual real world externally driven incidents, right? How many, how large, how often over a period of time. And everyone doing emergency response has that class of staffing issue. And sort of related, how long will ramp up take, which I think we have some good estimates on. I think section 1 does also. And are we how aggressive a timeline would we have to try to offer response to services? And I think that's an open question as well, but we got it addressed in there. Anything else? Krob, you were there. I'm not sure. I don't see Emily, but Emily's here. Yes, Krob or Emily were there, so they may have anything to add. Please do. Yeah.
I think that was.
And Randall. Sorry, Randall. Yep. Okay.
It's all good.
Sorry, man. Yep.
Any questions? For Art
I
on
listened to
section 2?
most of it.
All right. Well done.
All right. And section 3, Francis, any updates from you?
Not much. I mean, short of the discussion around what tech stack we want to adopt, we now have between 5 and 10 suggestions to explore, and a few of them are definitely better suited than others. But at the end of the day, we still need to choose depending on the services that we're willing and wanting to offer. So this may be blocked for a final decision on like these kind of this conclusion. So the survey issue 11 is actually tied to this discussion as well. So going forward, we'll need to think about what we want to do if we don't want to be blocked on any of the other action items from the other sections. So yes, Art.
Sorry, I had a small go back. Your dependency blocking item helped me recall that staffing model was also an issue for at least for section 2. I think for the whole thing, right? I think there's a vote going on, and maybe Krob knows the answer to the proper way to discuss this, or it's on the agenda. But that may also guide or dictate and influence some of our choices, right? If we're more volunteer or less volunteer, or where that comes out. Over.
Correct. Randall, go ahead. After that, I'll complete my update.
I actually have a question for Krob. If we ever finalized what engagement meant.
I don't know. Did you define that?
I didn't. Should I? I thought we were gonna have a vote on what engagement meant, because that was what was blocking as far as what are we gonna consider a successful outcome of the CERT.
We certainly can define that. It has not been something we have toiled to make more definite yet. If you have
Okay.
suggestions, we will welcome that. We can talk about it here. Emily, you had a question, statement?
More of a statement. So we actually have an initial set of types of engagement defined within the CERT skeleton doc that we said that we would revisit at a later date. And that was driven a little bit by a loose outline of potential service offerings. So while, and this kind of ties back to Francis's update, while we may not have the specific services fully detailed and fleshed out, we may have enough for an initial pass to move forward with the draft that's due by December 1st. And then based off of the survey responses, we can put a milestone in to integrate those responses back into the service listing and refine that further.
And maybe we make that a conversation now that we will be officially deciding on our staffing model here within minutes after Francis wraps up. Maybe we move on to the skeleton, kind of more formalizing what we want to pull out of that and start fobbing about what services we might like to initially offer. But I will turn it back over to Francis.
Yeah, just to close out the update, two of the major suggestions that we have so far are either GitHub issues into either a dedicated organization in order to contain the permissions correctly, and that still needs to be investigated, or the VINs, an instance of VINs that would be managed by us, but that comes with a few caveats as well. So if you have ideas, there's a discussion that is linked in from the meeting notes. Do participate, leave your comments, vote up, vote down, scream. This is a void.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Any questions or comments for Francis on section 3? Okie doke. I dropped a link to issue 11, which is our amazing vote we're going to take here. Many people expressed their opinion, and it looks as if we prefer to draft the plan with a staffing model that will be mostly volunteers, staffed by foundation members, and will be supported by a handful of FTEs for administrative type tasks. We had 1, 2, 3, 4 votes for that. We had 1 vote for 1, and then Brian gave a lengthy discussion that we can talk through if you have not read it yet. Francis.
Sorry to be very annoying about this with blocking the momentum, but don't we want to do a survey as well with the communities to see what they need?
We are, and that's part of section 1, but that's more like what services they want, not necessarily how we're going to staff it.
Okay.
And if we waited on that, then I can't recall what estimates we put down yesterday, but Emily helped us kind of really at least get a pretty good swag out there. Emily.
I think that's an interesting question, though, and I would like to take it the way that I interpreted it. Whether or not maintainers or open source communities and foundations would respond better to services that are offered by volunteers driving that activity versus paid staff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Actually, I do have feedback from the Gentoo Foundation that would heavily prefer volunteers over paid staff.
Okay, that's good data. Would you mind adding it in the comment in the
Please.
voting issue, please, Randall?
Yes.
Yeah, Emily hit the nail on the head on this one. Essentially, I'm curious, because we're all from different corporations. I don't see any of us here, there are very few of us contributing to this that are purely independent. So it does actually bring a brand, as well as it's a loaded intention of sorts to say hey, here's the CERT, here's how we're staffing it. So
I think that's something that can be deliberate and discussed more openly when we go and we do the education of the services, because there's a few different perceptions, and we've seen them come out, especially as of late, with blog posts from like Ileana and several others about supply chain security and the additional security requirements on maintainers. So ensuring that the language used in the expression of services to maintainers is such that while some of us may be employed by large corporate entities, which are part of larger organizations pushing for a lot of this change, that realistically the agreements that we have in place by being members of this CERT means that we're putting the vulnerability disclosure and reporting process first, and not necessarily the means and ends of the employer. And I think that language needs to be carefully worded, because that is a potential business decision that each employer needs to take on. And I think Brian had talked about this in the past, about they need to be capable of not disclosing certain information with their employer because of the sensitive nature of it. All that being said, we still haven't talked about like the concept of embargo listing. And if we're in that situation, how does that or the lack of those processes work, particularly if it is an extra large, like t-shirt size of an incident, very similar to Log4Shell. So I think part of this is going to be how we communicate this information, and then what kind of, like Francis said, a CERT oath is necessary to kind of move forward.
Well, I was going to even take that a step further. We need to work with the LF legal team and have some agreements written, basically, and set up an ethical wall that when you have this OSS-SIRT hat on, you are not necessarily representing the interests of your direct corporation. You're there representing the greater good. You're there representing open source, and you are obligated not to share internally unless there's specific allowances for need to know. So it will need to be, I agree, be very intentional and careful at how that gets worded, and get that protection for not only the volunteers, but also protection for the communities as well in our companies. Randall's hand was first.
Kind of to add to that, what the feedback that was shared with me was that if we're going to be a program that facilitates issues like security problems and whatnot, we should own the problem. And sometimes when you deal with like corporations, there's change in personnel for outside reasons and whatnot. So, and then it gets real messy because it goes through lots of hands, nothing gets done, communication gets broken. So I think the observation is, if you're more willing to take on the problem and like trying to solve the problem, you'll have better follow through, I think, is the ideology that was shared with me.
You're talking first, before I flip over to Art, Emily, are you referring to the legalese, getting that worked out?
Yeah, and just the actual writing of the content, because that's not captured as a milestone.
We'll need to put that in section 3.
Okay.
And I also would like to add the hiring of a program manager to oversee the execution of the plan and kind of eventually operations of the CERT, kind of helping coordinate tools and contracts and whatever else. Art. Not Art.
Unmute Art. I think I'm just agreeing here. Yes, a change of hats to the CERT team, right? I took off my corporate hat, I put on my OSS-SIRT hat.
We're going to make hats.
And we should have hats, and we should have whatever. Someone said an oath, but a
code of conduct, oath.
Yeah, and here's, I was just going to say, I would we certainly need that, no question there, absolutely. I venture to assume, not assume, but a lot of people who work in open source are already used to the hat changing game, and it would be my hope that we would find some qualified folks who this is not a surprise that they are, right? sort of switching gears. We're able to wear two at the same time, or 80% of one, 20% of one. So if we can find reasonably experienced community people, which maybe we can, shouldn't be a huge problem. Definitely agree we need something written down, and blood thumbprint on the big paper that says I promise to be good. Okay, that's it. Thanks.
Emily.
I would add on to that something that Randall said yesterday, which was around not the breakdown of communication between foundations. And there's a really good example of the discussions that have been going on between OpenSSF and CNCF around like projects existing underneath of both foundations. One of the concerns that was raised is because CNCF security professionals, like those folks in that community, are drawn to OpenSSF, we don't necessarily want to bleed the pool dry for both of them. We want to take advantage of those skills. The problem within open source, as Randall put it yesterday, is that we don't have clear lines of communication between different open source communities, different foundations. So while we may be well known within this group and within this entity for our altruistic purposes and completing a lot of this, that may not be well known outside of this organization and outside of this group. And as we engage with folks, we should expect to be treated with suspicion for our own employers and goals and needs. So I think making sure that we're clear and upfront that that assumption is being addressed first and foremost is going to be the most important for successful engagements.
Do we think we need a specific task for other foundation engagement?
It might be worthwhile, especially as the outreach goes.
Do we feel that would be Randall's section 1, kind of the community engagement piece, or Francis's execution piece?
I'll work with Randall. We'll battle the territory.
Yeah, but I would say go ahead. Let's get it in there. Add it as one of our either a new goal or a.
Let's make this a joint goal.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it does. Eventually, it's all going to get pushed back into one document anyway.
We
and
need
then
to complete the circle.
I will note for everyone that since we are going down the volunteer path, we have approximately 18 people that have expressed interest in this group. I don't know if that's a deep enough well to count as our bench, and we will need to think about and probably add a task to go intentionally recruit more foundation volunteers, or approach like the governing board to ask them, you need to pony up X or Y number of folks. Emily.
As far as the structure goes, have we discussed the idea of there's the primary incident responders, and then potentially there's advisors to the CERT that may not necessarily be the active individuals responding to a particular incident, but could be leveraged either for their known specialty in a particular space, or just as this person usually has a good idea about where things need to head and get done. Have we talked about that at all?
We have chatted about it once or twice. I don't know that we've ever formally written anything down, because we haven't started kind of drawing out how the team might look, because we don't know what services we're going to use, because we didn't know how we were going to be staffed. So now that we're starting to put some of these pieces together, I think that's an excellent conversation to have. And I think that's a very good proposal, that we're going to have a handful of people kind of on the bench that are the incident commanders, main facilitators, and then we would have a kind of a cloud of other folks we would lean into for subject matter expertise. I think that's a good model. Randall.
Possibly also in my community engagement, there has been interest expressed by different communities about possibly like contributing a team member or two from their security team to participate.
Yay.
Debian and Gen 2 and Homebrew all expressed interests in possibly working together, but yeah.
And there's something to say we can't be like a federated type model, that we would, if this is, if we bumped into a Kubernetes issue, that's absolutely going to get directed over to the Kubernetes security team. We'd be probably more of a support role for them. And then if it's a small project that's not affiliated with anybody, we might have a more hands-on role, and less that we wouldn't necessarily need to lean into like a commercial distro security team. But we'll see. It's up to us to write that up and staff that.
Yep.
bench, Francis. All right. Do we have any more thoughts around the vote? 4 votes in favor of it as the overwhelming majority. That is the voice of our community here. Any dissension or counter ideas? All right. I will note that we will be staffing towards a mostly volunteer model with a handful of foundation staff. I'll document that in the issue and the meeting notes so that we understand that decision going forward. Yeah, yes, we decided something. Yeah, you.
Can we put a little thing that says in 1 year we'll review this decision or we vote on it?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think
This would be explicit.
I think that we'll definitely need to probably put it into, when we recombine the documents, probably put that as a documented, this is, we're following kind of agile iterative methodologies, and we will be constantly reevaluating, and we will have certain review points. So I think we'll have that as a general disclaimer in the doc, but I will specifically put that for this. Emily.
So my question is whether or not that 1 year mark is the expected due date for completion of this final plan, or whether or not that is 1 year post completion and development of the processes for this group.
I would say it's going to be either the latter or on the anniversary of the sponsors actually funding the effort.
I think it would be beneficial to do it on the anniversary of the sponsors funding the effort.
I will get that. I will record that. I'll do that I'll do that during my next call when Dave's typing notes. Any other thoughts or discussion we desire to have today? I think the sub teams are making good progress. I don't feel we have any major blockers to stop us from delivering the plan back to the foundation folks. I'll start with Emily and then Randall.
So last time you and Francis took the monumental effort of breaking down the original plan into these individual sections, is the same expectation that upon completion of the sections that you both will then resume and merge them all together so they are a cohesive story, or is that something that you're looking for assistance with?
Oh, if someone wants to do that, I wouldn't stop them, but that is a task I was planning on doing myself, because we have to do things like normalizing the resource requests, so it's all stated kind of the same way and looks the same, and we're using their same words. If someone wants to help, I wouldn't turn it down, but that's something I was planning on looping Francis and the two of us hack on that. Randall.
Do we need to track over the course of said year performance of what we, like how we address the problems we defined in the CERT?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if that's actually in section 3. I know it's not in section 1. So
yeah, we'll definitely need to have some facility to. We talked about it a little bit yesterday about how after each incident, we'll do a little bit of a postmortem and figure out how we can refine the process, refine the training to kind of avoid future incidents like that. I think we definitely need to have some type of tracking mechanism we definitely need to have metrics on success criteria. And then we need to find ways to capture and kind of an general improvements log, I suppose.
So should that be added somewhere in one of the sections?
Yes.
Okay. Is it mine? Should I add it to mine?
That sounds more like an execution thing. So if you have
I
a
was gonna-
suggestion,
Okay.
fob something over into section 3 and we can refine it.
Okay. Sorry, Francis.
No worries. Just mention it on Friday when we meet.
I will.
We'll
Yeah.
triage it.
Yeah, you
Cool.
can even put the PR in now or wait till everyone's there. Well, I think everyone is you, me, and Francis.
File
Okay.
an issue. File an issue.
All right.
Yeah,
I'll
file
file
an
an
issue.
issue. I'll file an issue.
Excellent.
Thank you
Well,
for
I
filing
want
an issue.
to thank everybody for this vote. We are ready to move forward. I suppose it feels like perhaps chewing on the skeleton proposal is something probably a good next task for the full SIG to work on. Do we agree, or are there any other ideas while we work on finalizing the plan? Okay. We will circle back to the skeleton as a task in our next call. I'll start talking through some of those specifics. I want to thank everybody for attending, and I look forward to seeing you in future calls. Cheers.
Bye, everyone.